Hello, it is I. First of all, thank you for over 800 views on my last vlog. Low-key, I was really nervous because I didn't know what I would follow that up with, but like, thank you so much for all the love on that video. And also thank you for over 100 subscribers too. Like, thank you so much for sticking around, and I hope you continue to stick around, and thank you again for supporting me. Just thank you. I don't know what else to say. With the Shadow and Bone show coming out this past week, I had a thought. I was like, well, I remember nothing from the Shadow and Bone trilogy because I read them like 5 years ago. So I had a midnight thought. Why not reread it before the show comes out? So the past 3 days, that's all I've been doing, just listening to them via audiobook. I remember a few things, but majority of it I could not remember, I could not tell you, and it was basically like my first time reading it, which was very fun to say the least. And I figured while I hash out my thoughts about that trilogy and I guess predictions I have for the show, I would just sit down and ramble about my thoughts and feelings regarding the trilogy, Grishaverse, Shadow and Bone, Six of Crows, just everything. I would do a makeup look inspired by that series. I would try, keyword try, this makeup look I saw at 2 a.m. last night after I rewatched Catching Fire because nostalgia. I saw this and I was like, this would be a really cool like Darkling or Shadow and Bone inspired makeup look. So I haven't played with makeup in so long, so I figured this would be a good excuse for me to just ramble and make a video, which I haven't done in so long, while doing something I haven't done in so long. So this should be interesting. So I hope you enjoy. Come chill with me as I attempt this look. We'll see. It is currently almost 10 o'clock at night. This is when my creative juices start flowing. So let's hope this doesn't take long. So where to begin? As of right now, the Shadow and Bone show is going to be coming out in less than a week. It's currently Saturday. So this past week, I was like, I'm already excited for the show, but I want to make the most out of this experience. So I was like, it's been a while since I've read Shadow and Bone series, and to be honest, I didn't have any plans to reread the series because here's the tea. I actually did not care for it the first time I read it, and I only liked the last book, Ruin and Rising. So that's why I was like, don't think I'll ever reread it. That being said, this time around, I was like, I want to reread to make the most of the situation and experience of the show. I, last minute, was like, YOLO, let's see if I can reread this entire series. So I found out that my library didn't have the audiobook. Scribed didn't have it either. So I was like, gonna bite the bullet and get Audible again. Somehow I was able to get the 30-day free trial. The book gods were looking after me. They were like, okay, she needs to reread this. Gotta sculpt the rooms. How we looking? I think we look good. Okay, so I think the best way to go about this is to do my base first, which usually I do my eyes first, but since this is more so like an eyeliner eye look, I think it's safe to do my face first and then do the eye, which I'm probably gonna do off camera because that just looks like a lot of concentration. I'll just give like a brief rundown of what exactly happened in Shadow and Bone for those of you who are like me and don't remember what happened, or if you've never read it and you just want a refresher before the show comes out, or you just want to like hear my thoughts and rambles while rehashing the events of Shadow and Bone. We start off with a flashback of Alina and Mal in the orphanage that they grew up in, and we see that these two Grisha officers stop by the orphanage because they usually screen children to see if they have Grisha capabilities so they can recruit them to go to school to become part of the second army when they grow up. Alina and Mal are tested. Neither one of them test for being a Grisha. So we fast forward to present day. We see grown up Alina and Mal, and they're both part of the first army. Alina is trained to be a cartographer, so to be we're just gonna twist this off. Mal is training to be a tracker. We see them preparing for their voyage into the fold. They, as in Mal and Alina. When they enter the fold, it's pitch dark, and they know that the fold contains these creatures called the Volcra, and their ship naturally starts getting attacked by these said Volcra, and Mal gets attacked by one of them. So Alina runs over to him and is freaking out because homeboy is over here bleeding his life away. Right as the Volcra is about to attack her, she doesn't realize that as it's about to attack her, she shoots light out of her, and there's just a huge explosion of light, and she blacks out conveniently. So she wakes up after this in the Darkling's tent, and the Darkling proceeds to interrogate her. Naturally, she answers no when he asks her if she's a Grisha or not. All of this was happening in the very beginning. I was also recollecting the stuff that I had seen in the Shadow and Bone trailer, and I was like, damn bitch. First of all this stuff is happening so early on in the beginning, and second of all, I was like, whoa. Everything I could remember from the trailer was so spot on to what was happening in the book, and I said, huh, okay, Mark me as excited now. So yeah, so the Darkling approaches Alina with, in the book it was a knife, in the show or the trailer it was like this talon ring thing, and he cuts her, and when he cuts her, essentially sunlight leaks out of her, and because of that they're like, oh shit, she's the sun summoner. And there's this legend that a sun summoner would come about and they would be the ones to get rid of the fold, or the shadow fold. Alina, who up until now thought that she wasn't a Grisha, she ends up not only being a Grisha, but the one and only sun summoner. So the Darkling was like, okay, we're gonna take her back to the Little Palace. And so she's freaking out, she doesn't want to go with them, and so she escapes the carriage that was supposed to take her to the Little Palace, and after she escapes, a troop of Fjordan soldiers find her and kidnap her, which was funny to me because I was like, huh, this is really like our introduction to Matthias's character in Six of Crows, these Fjordan witch hunters or like Grisha hunters. They end up capturing her, and the Darkling happens to conveniently find her and save her from these Fjordan soldiers that were kidnapping her. And so he saves her, and he was like, LOL, I'm still gonna take you to the Little Palace. You thought you could get away. And I was like, oh, the people on the horse in the trailer, that was the Darkling and Alina. He ends up taking her back to the Little Palace, and on the way to the Little Palace, he starts explaining to her about his power and how it relates to her power. And the Darkling essentially presents her as a sun summoner. So that's when Alina meets David, meets Kenya, who also happened to be my favorite character of the whole Shadow and Bone trilogy. On top of Alina, I didn't like Alina at first, but like I think this second time around I ended up liking her a lot more. After this initial meeting with the king, they're like, okay, now you have to prepare for your training since now you're officially Grisha now. Along with her training, she starts training with the one and only Bagra to learn more about her sun summoning power. Fast forward, they prepare for this party, present the sun summoner for the first time. And again, keep in mind, this whole time she didn't know where Mal was, and she was sending letters to him, but she would never get a response. So she asked Genya to look into where he could possibly be stationed, and she thinks that Genya is looking into this like the good friend that she is. And so she finally finds out where Mal is. She sends her final letter And then after she sent her final letter, this is when the party is about to happen. The Darkling is presenting her to the guests as like their formal presentation. And afterwards, they do this little rendezvous in like this random room. After this said rendezvous, the Darkling was like, I'm gonna meet you after this party. I'm gonna come to your room, which was just, that was suspicious. She's about to go to her room all excited, and then she sees Mal. And so Mal, they end up having this reunion, and he's not really liking the whole dynamic that she has going on with like all the hoopla behind her being the sun summoner. And so they end up like somewhat having some sort of argument. So she goes to her room, and then later that night she hears a knock on her door and she thinks it's the Darkling, but then it ends up being Bagheera. And Bagheera was like, homegirl, you better yeet yourself out of here because shit's going down. And she was like, what, please elaborate. And so Bagheera ends up telling her about the Darkling's true intentions with her, as like in regards to her power. So she tells her that no, the Darkling is not gonna use you to destroy the Shadowfold. He actually wants you to eradicate the Volcra, who are the creatures that he did not actually intend on creating. They were just like a side effect of the creation of the Shadowfold, because there used to be this town that was there, and when the Shadowfold was created, any humans that were in the way ended up turning into Volcra. So the Volcra are actually the ones that the Darkling doesn't have control over, and they're the ones that are preventing him from utilizing the Shadowfold to basically take over the world. So that's what he was actually wanting Alina for. And at this point, Alina actually knew that the Darkling was trying to look for the first amplifier, which is the Morozsova's stag. She was fed the lie by the Darkling that he was trying to find it so she could harness her power better, because she was having trouble summoning her power on command. So he was like, oh, this is gonna help you like summon it a lot easier. And then Bagheera was like, LOL JK, he actually wants to use it to make you his slave, because whoever ends up killing the stag is able to control whoever they put the antlers on, or like the actual amplifier on. So she was like, that's why you better leave, because they have a lead to where the stag is. Alina was like, why didn't you tell me sooner? And Bagheera was like, you ungrateful girl. The reason why I haven't told you yet is because this plan is going a lot faster than I was expecting. So she was like, yes, you need to leave tonight. So she runs away. Everything is seemingly fine. Oh, and also Mal's team, because the Darkling kept asking Alina how good of a tracker Mal was, and so she didn't know that the Darkling was essentially using him and his crew to find the Morozsova's stag. That's what their initial goal was, or their initial mission. So when she runs away, she finds out that it's only a matter of time before the king or the Darkling start looking for her. So a few days pass by, and Mal ends up finding her, and he tells her that he deserted his team. He said that their initial mission was to find Morozsova's stag, but since she disappeared, it changed so that they had to go find her instead. So he intentionally led them away from her trail, so that way they would be far enough away that when he actually went to go find her, they would be too far behind. So I was like, that's the first good thing you did, Mal. He brings her up to speed. He was like, yeah, I tried to lead them as far away as possible from you, and as soon as they were far enough away, I deserted them and went to go find you. So that is how we got to where we are right now. So she ends up bringing Mal up to speed on the whole amplifier situation, the Darkling, her power, and like his intentions for her with the amplifier. So they're like, okay, we can't not find it now, and we have to find it before the Darkling, because if she's the one that ends up killing the stag, then she can like control her power and prevent the Darkling from using her as a slave. So they end up switching gears and start their search for the stag. And when they finally have their first heart-to-heart moment and their first kiss, that's when the stag finally appears to them. Alina hesitated too long, and the Darkling found them, and he bound her and Mal with his guards and killed the stag before they could. And so he made a deal with Alina that he would keep Mal alive as long as she cooperated with him. So of course, like the lovesick girl she is, she agrees to him. So the Darkling kills the stag, he makes the amplifier. David ends up being the one to actually make the final design of the amplifier with the stag's antlers, and they seal it onto her. So she has essentially reached slave status right now, because now he has put the amplifier on her, and now she has no choice but to do his bidding. Now that she has the amplifier on her, they end up heading towards the Darkling ship, because, plot twist, he's taking them back into the Shadowfold because to enact his plan, he wants to use her. Since he now has the amplifier, she has no choice but to follow him. He's gonna use her to destroy the Volcra, and so he can harness the power of the Shadowfold. When they enter the Shadowfold, she realizes that she can still control her powers despite having the amplifier. So she is able to reel in her power before destroying the Volcra and sends them all into complete darkness. And she yeets herself off the ship after Mal, and they end up running away across the Shadowfold into West Ravka, leaving the Darkling and his ship behind inside the Shadowfold. So it's seemingly perfectly fine because they had left the Darkling inside of the Shadowfold. So they're like, LOL, he's stuck, he's a goner, that's it, he can't really do much. So that's how the first book ends. So as long as they can stay hidden, they're all good. And I was like, I did not remember any of this, so that was a good call that I reread it, because I now have refreshed my memory, and now I can also say that the trailer is so accurate to the events that happen in that book, so I'm really cautiously optimistic for this adaptation. First read, I very much was team Alina and Happiness, because the Darkling nor Mal deserved her in any sense of the word, let alone the fact that the Darkling used her as a slave and assaulted her twice. Darkling stands, I don't know what y'all are on, but that's not cute. To further elaborate on my point, this is word for word. So this is after the Darkling had put the collar on Alina, and she was begging for Mal's life, and that's why she was willing to cooperate with him if he spared Mal. So I'm just gonna read the quotation. He raised his other hand to cup my face and kissed me softly, gently, and though everything in me rebelled, I let him. I hated him, I feared him. If y'all think that's okay, no. And then Mal was just throwing a temper tantrum the whole time because he couldn't handle having a bad bitch like Alina. So that's how we were feeling the first time and the second time around. But second time around, Mal was a lot more tolerable. I don't know what happened, but it wasn't as black and white as I remember it being, that he was very against her. But upon second read, Mal was a lot more tolerable, and honestly, he wasn't throwing a temper tantrum until the end of the second book, and it wasn't necessarily that he didn't like her. It was more so like what she was becoming because of the societal demands due to who she was. In the end, he was a lot more tolerable than I remember him being, but I still ship Alina with Happiness, whether that's her being on her own, her being with Mal. You do you, boo, whatever makes you happy for all the trauma you went through. Initially, upon first read, I actually did ship her with Nikolai, but even Nikolai deserved better than that whole situation. So yeah, that's where I stand. I'll be back. Hopefully this eye look looks good.
2 hours later.
So this is the final look. I think it looks pretty good. I think I'm nervous because I've never done a makeup look like this before. So Cork's husband hit me up. So this is currently a situation. I think it's like 1:30 a.m. because I was really self-conscious about this whole situation. Anyway, this is Darkling Realness. My interpretation. We will see how I feel about this in the morning. So last night was a lot. I ended up sleeping like super late because it was a whole mess. I never really shared my theories in regards to the show because I was so preoccupied. Like I had said before, there were a lot of parallels between the beginning of the book and what we had seen from the trailers. So I have really high hopes that the show is going to be pretty accurate, if not spot on to the book. So I'm really cautiously optimistic about that aspect. And since then, I had also rewatched the Building the World video that Netflix had come out with, where they're interviewing Eric and Lee. I noticed that not only was Lee the writer of the show, or co-writer of the show, but also an executive producer. So that just had my hopes skyrocket in the best way. My faith is like more preserved now knowing that. And so yeah, I think in regards to Shadow and Bone, it's gonna be pretty spot on to that trilogy. I originally was really worried about how they're going to incorporate the crows, especially since Six of Crows happens 2 years after the events of Ruin and Rising. Originally, they're not ever going to have an interaction between the crows and the original Grisha character. So with Alina with Mal, upon, like I said, rewatching the Building the World video, instead of having the heist that they originally have to go on for Six of Crows, the book, they are instead having to, I guess, kidnap Alina as a sun summoner. And so that's, I think, how they're going to incorporate the crows into the show. And I also heard that Kaz is supposed to have some sort of showdown with the Darkling, which I'm very much going to be that meme of SpongeBob not knowing where to look whenever they're on screen together. And I'm really nervous, but also I'm excited to see like how they're going to interact with each other. I do know that we better get that eyeball scene. Y'all know which scene I'm talking about. If we do not get Kaz Brecker, if you don't get Kaz Brecker yanking out someone's eyeball because they threatened Ine, we better get violent Kaz, just everything. I think it's also going to be somewhat similar to how the crows are introduced in the book. That's how they're going to be introduced in the show, with Kaz, Jesper, and Inej being the initial trio. But I'm interested to see how Nina and Matthias are going to be tied in, because in the book, Nina ends up getting Matthias because they need Matthias to get into the Ice Court, but the Ice Court, as far as I know, is not going to come into play for this season of the show. I don't know, I feel like season 2 we're going to get a closer story to the actual Six of Crows books, whereas season 1 it's going to focus more on the original Shadow and Bone trilogy, maybe even into season 2, because we don't know exactly if the show is going to go a season based off of each Shadow and Bone book. But honestly, I have a feeling that we're definitely going to get the stag scene in season 1. Not sure about the sea serpent and Mal tying into the whole amplifier situation. Definitely the stag is going to happen. Editing, Samira. So I forgot to mention this one part of my theory, which honestly is just like the last part of my theory. I honestly think that they're going to pull a To All the Boys I Loved Before moment, in the sense that at the very end of the season, maybe an after credit scene, I don't know, but I feel like that's when we're gonna get our Nikolai cameo. We are manifesting, okay? We're gonna manifest that. Honestly, I'm just trying to go into it as blind as I can. I have to work on the day that it comes out, and I'm so upset, but I'm gonna be working turbo speed. I'm not gonna be on my phone at all on Friday until I can start the show, and as soon as I finish the show, I know it's just gonna be vibes and emotions. I'll probably be rewatching it several times throughout the weekend. I don't know if I'm going to film myself while I watch. Honestly, I feel like my brain cells can't handle that much multitasking. I might end up doing a thoughts after. Let me know if you want like a thoughts video after the show comes out. I might do one if you guys are interested. Definitely let me know what your theories are for the show, what your thoughts are. Are you excited? I'm excited now, but now I'm just kind of anxious leading up to the show because like it's gonna be mainstream and I don't know how I feel about that, but I'm just gonna focus on the positive, and with all the PR that Netflix is doing for it so far, I have high hopes. I hope you liked this video. Thank you for watching this, and yeah, let me know if you want me to do that. So until next time, bye!